Episode 6, The Musician. The twang of a guitar string, the opening notes of a familiar melody, fingers dancing across frets, coaxing out a tune that could make you weep or set your feet to tapping. That was the magic of Louis Yancey. Born and raised in the sticky heat of Horry County, South Carolina, Louis had always had a song in his heart and a guitar in his hands. Even as a young boy, he'd sit on the porch of his family's ramshackle farmhouse, picking out hymns and spirituals while the cicadas buzzed in the trees. Music, his mama always said, was a gift from the Lord. And Louis sure had been blessed in abundance. It was that gift that carried him out of the tobacco fields and into the Army Air Corps in the late 40s, just as the flyboys were transitioning to the shiny new Air Force. Louis cut a dashing figure in his crisp blue uniform, his jet black hair slicked back, his guitar slung over his shoulder. He'd strum for his bunkmates in the long hours between drills, soothing jangled nerves with folk tunes and honky-tonk. Before his initial hitch was up, Louis was shipped off to Germany as part of the occupying force in the aftermath of the war. It was a strange time, a time of rebuilding and reckoning, of hope and heartache all tangled up together. But amidst the rubble and the ruin, Louis found a spark of magic. Her name was Gabrielle. Gabrielle Enninger was a vision, a rosebud of a girl with flaxen hair and eyes the color of cornflowers. She worked in the commissary on base, and from the moment Louis laid eyes on her, he was a goner. He courted her with all the charm and persistence he could muster, serenading her with love songs under the pale German moon. Gabrielle, for her part, was smitten by this lanky, guitar-slinging GI with the honeyed Carolina drawl. They married in a little chapel on base, surrounded by a ragtag bunch of airmen and local girls. Louis wore his dress blues, Gabrielle a simple white frock she'd stitched herself from parachute silk. They danced to the Tennessee Waltz, Louis singing low in Gabrielle's ear. When his tour was up, Louis brought his bride back to the States, determined to make a life for them in the only way he knew how, with his music. They settled in Nashville, where Louis picked up steady work as a studio musician. His nimble fingers and keen ear made him a hot commodity, sought after by producers and band leaders alike. He played for Sun Records, for the legendary songwriting duo Felice and Boudleaux Bryant. He strummed his Gibson on the Louisiana hayride, backing up every country crooner and rockabilly cat who came through. Word got around about Louis Yancey, this low country man who could make a guitar sing and cry in a dozen different genres. He was a session player's session player, adaptable and unflappable, as comfortable with a back porch Piedmont blues as he was with a big band swing standard. Through it all, Gabrielle was his anchor, his port in the storm. She kept a tidy home in their little shotgun house on the outskirts of Music City, always with a pot of chicken and dumplings on the stove and a kind word on her lips. On the nights Louis played the Grand Ole Opry, backing Hank Williams' first wife, Audrey, Gabrielle would be there in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. They said Audrey Williams was so beautiful that she could stop traffic, that men would crash their cars just catching a glimpse of her on the sidewalk. But Louis only had eyes for his Gabrielle. For 15 blissful years, they lived in perfect harmony, until that fateful night in '69. Louis had taken a gig in Las Vegas, playing with a band at one of the big casinos on the Strip. Gabrielle flew out to join him for the weekend, eager for a taste of the big city glamour. She was crossing the street to meet Louis after his late show when it happened. A car, swerving out of nowhere, moving too fast to stop. In a blink, in a heartbeat, the music died. After the funeral, after the condolences and the casseroles, Louis retreated into himself. He quit taking gigs, stopped going to the studio. His guitar gathered dust in its case, the strings going slack and sour. What use was music without his muse? What use was anything? It was his old friend Jeannie who pulled him out of his funk, bullying and cajoling him into rejoining the land of the living. Jeannie ran a little joint in Myrtle Beach, a combination arcade and music hall called the Electric Circus. She offered Louis a regular slot in the upstairs lounge, just him and his guitar, and the tourists hungry for a taste of something real. So Louis went. He played. He survived. But a part of him, the best part, was still back on that Vegas street corner, still reaching for Gabrielle's hand as the car bore down. He took to carrying a worry stone in his pocket, a smooth river rock he'd picked up on some long-ago ramble through the Carolina hills. At night, alone in his room at the boarding house, Louis would rub the stone between his fingers, his calluses catching on the cool, pitted surface. And as he did, the world would fall away and he would see her. Gabrielle, as solid and real as if she'd never left. In those moments, the worry would drain out of him, replaced by a wash of memory so vivid it was like living it all again. The lilt of her laughter, the apple blossom scent of her hair, the cool press of her hands on the back of his sunburned neck. But the stone held more than just memories. There was a strange energy to it, an almost palpable pulse that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Louis couldn't explain it, but he felt drawn to the stone in a way he had never been drawn to anything, save music and Gabrielle herself. And there were nights, he would never have spoken of this to a living soul, when the stone did not merely call her memory up, but seemed to thin the very air between then and now, so that for a few suspended breaths, it was not remembering at all but living. The years folding shut like the pleats of an accordion. On those nights he would wake clear-eyed and unwearied, younger somehow, as if the stone had quietly spent some portion of his future to buy back a sliver of his past. He told himself it was grief playing tricks. He was almost sure it was not. Nearly a decade on, Louis still played the Electric Circus most nights. His latest gig was with a Gulf and Western act out of Alabama, their breezy tunes a perfect fit for the lounge's lazy beach vibe. Louis's guitar hummed along nicely with the steel drums, his fingers finding the familiar grooves with practiced ease. But even as he played, his mind wandered, as it so often did, to Gabrielle, to the life they had shared and the future that had been ripped away. The depth of his loss, the ache of it, seeped into his playing, bending the notes into something raw and haunting. He could feel it in the way his fingers moved across the fretboard, the way he would hold a chord just a breath too long, letting it hover on the edge of breaking. The audience, caught up in the lazy sway of the music, never noticed. But Louis felt it in his bones, in the hollow place where Gabrielle used to be. It was in these moments when the grief threatened to swallow him whole that Louis would reach for the worry stone. He kept it in his pocket always, a talisman against the darkness. When the memories came, when the loss cut too deep, he would rub his thumb across the stone's smooth surface, letting its strange warmth seep into his skin. And for a moment, just a moment, he could imagine Gabrielle was there with him. He could feel her hand in his, could hear her voice whispering in his ear, "Keep playing, my love, keep living." But the spell never lasted long. The song would end, the last notes fading into the smoky haze of the lounge, and Louis would be alone again. Alone with his grief, his regrets, and the cold certainty that a part of him had died that night in Vegas, scattered like ashes on the desert wind. He knew, in some deep-down place, that he needed to find a way to move on. That this half-life he was living, this endless purgatory of memory and longing, would consume him if he let it. Jeannie had told him as much, her usual brassy manner softened by genuine concern. "Sugar, you can't keep going on like this," she'd said one night after closing, her hand a gentle pressure on his arm. "It's been almost 10 years. Gabby, she'd want you to live, Louis. Really live, not just survive." Louis had nodded, his throat too tight for words. Because Jeannie was right. Of course she was right. But knowing a thing and doing it were two vastly different propositions. How could he let go when letting go meant losing Gabrielle all over again? When it meant admitting, finally and forever, that she was gone. So he clung to the memories, to the ghost of her that lived in the Worrystone's enchanted depths. He played his gigs, he smiled at the tourists, he went through the motions of a life half-lived. And all the while the stone pulsed in his pocket, a secret heartbeat, a promise of something more. Louis didn't know what the stone was or where its power came from. He only knew that it was the last bit of magic left to him in a world gone grey and cold. And he would hold on to it, onto her, until his fingers bled and his soul ran dry. Even if it meant living in the past forever. Even if it meant never truly living at all.